I'm here. Thank you so very much. It's such a pleasure to participate in this event. I think once I had to speak after Ken, and as I say, to speak after Ken about language or reading, it's like talking about physics after Einstein. She says in English, I'll do my best. And then with Phyllis and also different types of literacy methods. Let me see if we could bring to earth, to Argentina mostly, what we've heard right now. In fact, none of us knew about our presentations, and I should even say that we have the same even charts in some of our presentations. Let me talk about two topics, but first, I'd like to start by telling you something that is paramount. We're talking about using evidence for an improvement in education, use evidence to improve, and how we teach as well. In the second half of last century, especially between the 50s and the 80s, there were so many important theories that came about regarding teaching and learning. It was a very important decade. I think there were 30 years in all, very important periods where they coined fundamental theories regarding literacy and other issues that were used, and they're still being used, but they were very important indeed until at some point in time, which was the brain decade between 1990 and 2000, all these studies can show started on. We were able to see the brain and to start to confront the hypotheses and theories with scientific facts. And so, the truth is that having all this, having the knowledge, the brain knowledge, being able to see brain activity when children read, when they speak, etc., enables us to reformulate theories we had based on evidence. And so this is of paramount importance because without that, it's very hard to make changes or sustainable changes. Such evidence, well, the rationale was, let's take it to the classroom, which is a little bit what Ken said. All the different advances and how to take neuroscience to the classroom with pros and cons, mentioned by Ken as well. Some of them we know they're not true. They come as if they were a brownie recipe. But we don't have a recipe here on how to do it. But we do have other recipes or theories that are the basis for better systems. Literacy is one of those. Not far back in a congress or conference regarding neuroscience and education, I heard one of the interesting experts, Danielle Willingham, say that if you're sick and you have pancreatic cancer and there's a doctor who discovered the cure for it, you'll go to that doctor to be cured. But if you go to somebody else who says, you know what, I have my own system and with this method I may improve, but nobody would remain with that doctor. You would go to the one who has the evidence and that works. We don't do that in education though. In education we love theories, it's hard for us to change, and the truth is that it should be much more dynamic than what it is. We should be able to use much more evidence for changes. I'll show you Argentine data, which are not nice at all. We must make radical decisions. Maybe they're not so complicated to make, but they're important decisions on what to do to change things. Part of this evidence, I'll take two pillars. One is dyslexia, which is and was in the 80s, I think, with the first grade hypotheses regarding neuronal migration. Today, studies are confirming that dyslexia is a specific learning difficulty. A very high percentage of children, 10% of the population, are dyslexic, depending, of course, on the languages from 7 to 15. We may think that a country like ours, it may be 10% of the population, but beware. Let's not confuse dyslexia with educational system problems. And we have to be very careful because our educational system is a great problem when we talk about reading. And the other pillar is literacy. So with this surge and the possibilities of science brought about literacy, how do we make children literate? Some systems may be better than others. Manolo will later on talk about a comparative study. But basically, On the one hand, how to work with all, including those that are dyslexic, and on the other hand, which are the best literacy programs. How do we do that? I will be talking about these two issues. First, let me go a step back. There were some studies, important studies, compared in 7 very different countries with social structures very different indeed. The question was, can I know in preschool how that child will do long term in school? What are the factors? If I were able to perceive, and if there were any, at age 5, that will tell me how they will do regarding their schooling. The idea is very important. If I could pinpoint those factors, I know I have to work with everybody, of course. So knowledge is the best way to work with all. This is called school readiness studies that were performed by the great organizations worldwide. The results were really fundamental. Basically, knowledge of letters and numbers, the sense of numbers, and also of size, will tell me how the child will do at school long term. So how their learning trajectories will be are related to this. Not how they draw, how many friends they have. I mean, there is a part of executive functions and attention, but so far it seems like this is what leads the study. So what we know is that language is paramount. To develop language, what Ken said this morning in opening. So it is paramount to develop language, and especially in a country like Argentina, we have children who come into the educational system with socioeconomic conditions that are very different. Some children whose families reading and conversation is fluent and on a daily basis, and others not. The educational system must operate in the early education to level it out, because the educational system, the good one, starts early on, not when you have to remediate at the end, when you have, for instance, reading comprehension when you start college. No way. What we didn't do before, we can't remediate 15 days prior to college. So this is what Ken said this morning. There is a relationship between language and reading, which is parasitical. It is. I really need language to read. I can't read without language. I need a sound language structure. But what happens in language? It happens with dyslexia, because if reading sits on or lies on language, dyslexia, which is a reading disorder also. And so it's important to understand why we really underscore language development and the explicit language work in the classroom from the very beginning. Let me go back on something Ken said, and he quoted it too. We know that human beings speak. We have a linguistic brain. It's human. Human beings develop language, evolutionary speaking, for many years now. But we don't really read naturally. We walk, yes, we speak, we have other developments that are part of human maturity, but that's not reading. And as Tandian says, acquiring reading is an artificial and hard activity, whereas spoken language arrives to us spontaneously. You can't really wait until reading ripens. No, you learn how to read it. It's really a teaching process with systematic, explicit teaching, as Phyllis said. So you need this process sustainably. You have to change the linguistic brain into a reading brain, because our brain is linguistic, and that's the process we have to undergo, as Ken says, to become a reading brain. If we know that there is a relationship, basic relationship, between how a child speaks at 4 and how at 6 and how he reads at 8. I have schools where children go to preschool and then elementary, and I see them in both grades, and then in third school with language problems or reading problems, and I could have seen this way before. Last year, between 2016 and 2017, there was a recategorization which was really paramount of what they are, how they're called, how they're categorized, and what are the characteristics of child language disorder. They abandoned the concept of specific language disorder because it has to do with nomenclature, terminology. But in this reclassification of language disorders, one of the fundamental points in the classification, in other words, when we say a child has a language disorder, this means three main things. One, that it has an impact that goes beyond infancy, beyond childhood. I mean, the gap doesn't close. Two, there is an impact also on his or her social life. There are wonderful studies on long-term problems, occupational problems. But what we're mostly concerned with is that language disorders have a significant impact on educational progress. And this is part of the definition of language disorder. We know that the foundations of this is here, so we know where we have to start to look. We're not going to be diagnosing right now, but we know where we have to start looking, and we know the the foundations. Why do children have reading disorders? Because of this. And in this consensus, this is a paragraph of that consensus, it clearly states that focus is on oral language in spite of the fact that reading and writing are typically and generally affected. They are part of the same definition of a language disorder. We cannot separate them. We are not saying that it's the same. We are saying that language disorders indicate that that child probably has school problems. But even more so, we know that when a child has a language disorder problem at age 5, he's just coming into formal education, which is the literacy. These are children who have very, very high school risk. We say risk in terms of reading problems and schooling problems, and then a persistent gap. So his or her linguistic structure, especially regarding vocabulary, you've heard Ken and Phyllis underscoring vocabulary. That gap will not close. These are studies that started in 1987 with Bishop and Edmondson. To date, the difference is that the pie is divided differently. We have a smaller slice in light blue. These are studies that take a very large population with language disorders, children at age 4, and they are followed until 5.5 years of age, which is the average age to enter elementary school. What you see is that out of 100%, only 15% improves their language disorder at 5.5 years of age, an average, let's say, age. The remaining group does not improve. They go into first grade having then a difference in their linguistic levels, and they're low levels for an 8.5-year-older. We know that the linguistic level is of paramount importance for schooling, and we know that that is the persistent gap. That persistent gap is in vocabulary. These are children that when they are exposed to a text, or because these are the ones that are right here, who had improved, even those children will have that vocabulary gap. When they're exposed to text, when they have to use the context to decode, they can't do it. They're missing a lot of vocabulary. And so this is the upper line, indicates the lexical development in a child without language disorder. In the hyphenated line, it's the same development, but you see the gap never closes. The difference still remains, and that is in the lexicon. There is an impact, a significant impact in reading and in reading comprehension. There is no reading comprehension without vocabulary, so initial education has a paramount role, as Phyllis said, explicitly talking about the vocabulary. It's not enough just to expose children to vocabulary. We know that children with language disorder, when they're 3, when they're 4, and even 5, especially at 5, are a risk population, and they're at risk for developing dyslexia. This has to be borne in mind. We cannot let a child with language disorder to say, okay, he's okay now. Be very careful, beware, because we cannot many times perceive it, especially when the diagnosis, the dyslexia diagnosis, will not be done in the initial stages of the child's education. So, what I showed earlier, these children may not have a dyslexia diagnosis, but they may have severe difficulties in reading comprehension. Perfetti showed reading efficiency and how children with language difficulties, if I give all the relevant information, the baseline information for inference purposes, if I give it to a control group and language disordered children, even those cannot infer. So, I mean, it's not just in reading, but it's the inference in and of itself. So, this is the paper, a new paper, showing that in comparative groups, the group that worse functions in inferring is the one that has language disorders. So, I may not have that difficulty in decoding, but I may have it in terms of reading comprehension. So, so this really explains the disaster in Argentina of our reading comprehension. No, not at all. This is a subgroup, a very tiny subgroup. The prevalence in language disorders is 7%. Dyslexia is 10%. I'll show you the figures of reading comprehension. In any case, this is what we know. Early detection or screening is important. As Phyllis says, it's much better to detect than to remediate, to prevent than to remediate. It's less costly for the children, and it's a life changer. One thing is doing it at 5, and another is when you change, after second grade. So although dyslexia diagnosis is in elementary school, the early detection is in kindergarten, and this is related to language. It has to do with linguistic levels, syntaxis, morphology, phonology, and lexicon. And so, considering all this, this would be the definition by the International Dyslexia Association. There are main points that have been translated. It's a specific learning disability, neurobiological in origin. It was discussed in a conference 2 years back. Luckily, the law was enacted. We were here present. Some of us are present here. It's like pancreas cancer. You don't discuss it. It's a fact. And in addition, there's difficulty in the fluid and accurate reading. I have to read it, but read it well, and not as fast as Phyllis said. Speed is important, but speed for comprehension purposes. In addition, the consequences may include a lexicon increase. For instance, if I'm less exposed to reading, then my lexicon will not increase either. And this is a result of phonological components in language. And I'd like to speak a little bit longer about this last bullet point. It has to do with literacy and also in what Phyllis said earlier. One of the most important things, and a very important paper, saying, let's not discuss the neurobiological origin. We know it. And what this says is that there are two things we have to think when we think about dyslexia. One, we have to work on phonological awareness. And two, we have to rethink how we make our children literate, because we will minimize the impact of the reading issue in each one who suffers that problem. So it's not that you can't do anything because it's a neurobiological thing. All to the contrary.
What is the relationship between phonological awareness and dyslexia, or phonological awareness and literacy? I will go down one step. In order to understand that the phonological system is the human language system, we have a phonological system that allows us to differ or distinguish sounds. B, P, pato, gato are different words. All these symbols that we see here are the consonant symbols existing in all the languages. All of us must, plus people who are not here, between birth and 8 months old, we have the capacity to distinguish all these sounds that are shown here. We know this uh, as the result of brain studies. It's not that the baby can say p, t, but this is what we know thanks to research. This is what will build up the phonological awareness. This is having the capacity to distinguish all these sounds which will become noise. It, probably this sound I have just made can be a sound in Africa, but for us it's a noise. It's not an auditory problem, it's the problem of how the sound is conceptualized. It is the map of sounds in our mind. So we are going to stay with all these because the rest will be lost. I need to be an expert in order to keep only the things that are valid for my language. The longitudinal Finland study followed a group of families with a background of dyslexia and other families that had no background. And children were followed from birth to the age of 16. When they had the children that already had a diagnosis of dyslexia, the question was, when do we see the first specific or particular characteristics in all the studies that we conducted? Because they were subject to studies from the day they were born. And before 6 months old, they were not able to identify phonological constructs. So before being 6 months old, they showed signs that they had some problem in their phonological awareness. Do illiterate people have phonological awareness? They have never been exposed to reading, and the answer is no. But how come, if the phonological system belongs to language, as soon as you try to teach them a little bit, they will catch on immediately. So they require direct instruction in order to develop that characteristic. Another study by Wimmer et al. Showed us that the fact is that I have different instances, and they found that there was a significant group of children that when they were starting first grade, they had a good phonological aware and they ended up being skilled readers. But there is another group that starts first grade with poor phonological conscience, but they are also skilled readers. So they realize that it is not the absolute initiation, but really how easy they develop the phonological awareness in the process of literacy instruction, the process of feedback between reading and phonological awareness, because one system supports the other. The phonological system is organized as the phonological awareness, and this will become the foundations on which the literacy system will be based. But I need to think of phonological awareness because I won't be able to create a literacy system without this element. Let's talk about literacy. A short time ago, we presented documents in the ministry, and we decided, or we found, that it is very important to establish. We live in a country where with very different socio-economic levels and with a very marked pyramid. We need to teach all of our students. So it is very important to understand that early education plays a significant role in working on phonological awareness so that all the children are prepared to start first grade teaching. So this has to be done firmly and steadily if we are to achieve educational equity. Because not all the children bring from the houses or from the homes vocabulary, so the educational system has to work on phonological awareness. Let's talk about literacy. In Argentina, especially in Argentina, but in other parts of the world, there is a debate on literacy. There are some things that shouldn't be debated because there's a lot of scientific evidence that shows us what things work and which have no foundation, no grounding. We have information, we have reading, we have the teachers that read, and so this encourages the child or the children to build his or her own literacy system. And this shows that we need to teach the literacy principle that A belongs to árbol, T to tree. So there's a lot of evidence about this in an educational blog a few days ago. uh, Timothy Shanahan, this gentleman, makes some comments related to literacy systems. He says, as research becomes more specific and rigorous, it is evident not that students cannot learn without phonic instructions, but rather that they learn in a more effective manner with making better progress and more powerful forward. And besides, some children need that type of instructions. Children can learn without explicit phonic instruction, but without it, many children learn how to read, although they have lower reading levels. New data, new prospects makes us rethink the problems. The smartest thing is to give students explicit learning on sound, symbol, grapheme, and phoneme. Why insisting in keeping ideas that cannot be kept? How should we insist on something that has no evidence? The purpose or the objective is to recognize written works. We should try to do what skilled readers do, which is to be supported on spelling and phonology rather than what poor readers do, which is using the context and the images to guess the meaning. This is not a minor piece of information. What it basically says is that we have a linguistic brain and we have to turn it into a reading brain. I need a systematic teaching that teaches or tells me that for each grapheme there is a sound, and in Spanish we have the advantage that we always have the same. P-O is paw. But for the English speakers, this is more difficult. We need to convert the cortical circuit of reading. If we do this in an explicit manner, explicit instruction or teaching, only then children will read. The reading brain does not mature. It is built from the very beginning. This is what Ken was showing to us. I create those networks, those circuits that do not exist in those children who do not read. This is the circuits that help me read, so I need to create that. I cannot expect the children to build these circuits on their own because the cost would be very high. I will come back to something that Phyllis said. In order to read how to to learn how to read, I need somebody to teach me how to read. I need a teacher. I need explicit instruction. And I need this to be done in a systematic way with practice in the classroom with the teacher that corrects and shapes what I do. I need repetition, repetition, and repetition. I need exercising, dictation, writing, reading, multisensorial practice. I need to learn how to read and how to write. And also, I need to learn how to write with the good spelling from the very beginning. What can we read here? This does not mean vaca. Vaca is, you write vaca this way. There is a central thing. If we work with spelling from the very beginning, I will achieve better writers. Writers because they produce better and with spelling correction. And I also supporting or reinforcing lexical reading, because when they see vaca with B-A-K-A, they are not reading anything. That does not mean anything. So it's central that we understand this. This should be explained or should be taught in an explicit manner. I have and also some obvious instruction that the P is that way. If you write the P the upside down, that's not a P. It's to the right. In Spanish, it's always that way. You never write the P the other way, to the left. And one of my students said, made a mistake. He wrote the P upside down, and he said, I was standing the other way. No, I don't care. You have to write the P always to the right. And what about I dictated pato and he wrote pito? That's you are not writing pato. Where is the A? I told him. So these are. I mean, we need to be very obvious. The P goes to the right. I write what I say. I want to achieve good reading comprehension, and this has to do with language and with word recognition. And language has to do basically with the basic knowledge of the world, but basically it has to do with vocabulary. I think that you will leave this meeting with the word vocabulary in your heads, linguistic structure and verbal reasoning. And also I need to recognize words. I need a phonological awareness, decodification or decoding, and lexical reading. And need to be strategic, and I need to be automatic. So I need all these elements. When I show you the charts of education in Argentina, probably this is not the only cause, but probably it's one of the most important causes, because we don't work on any of these things, or we work with them poorly or partially, and for sure we don't do it explicitly. Phyllis, this is for you. Exactly the same slides. So I will skip this because we didn't know that we were showing the same slide and the same information. The question is, are we going to work with some or with all of them? Are we going to teach those who learn 5, 20 or 30% more, or are we going to teach everybody, all our students? I want to close talking about reading comprehension. This is not an isolated discipline. It's not something that I learned up separately. It's the result of learning how to read. I'm going to give some figures, very ugly numbers. 80% of candidates to join the medical school didn't pass the exam because of poor reading comprehension. 100% of candidates to the police school didn't pass the test or were not admitted because they were not able to understand a basic text. And then we have the Aprender test that shows that reading comprehension in Argentina, very bad. These are the results in high school, secondary school. This is below the media, below the mean, below standard. Why are things so wrong? Why are they doing so bad? I will show you a question for sixth grade where the basic things cannot be based. This is a story of a boy that find a bottle in the seaside, and children cannot answer that. And so the basic reading levels in sixth grades are compared to the ones of fourth grade. This is elementary school. The test results are very poor, and the standards we are using as measuring criteria are also very bad. That's the problem, very low. That's the problem. These are the results of Argentina from the CERCE and TERCE tests. This happens with countries that put in place very important education policies to improve writing and reading. This is possible because some countries did it. We didn't do anything. The evolution in Argentina is the result of the PISA test for Argentina, 2000-2012. So the trend goes downward. In the 2013 PISA, we were the one before last in Latin America. We're below the average of Latin America, which is in turn below American countries. So we need to really face the problem because it is a very serious problem. One learns how to read and then you read to learn. I start with mama, papa, and I have to understand this, and only then I'll be able to read a text. The simplest model of understanding reading comprehension is this one. I can understand where somebody has reading comprehension. He can understand D and C. D is decoding, and C is a listening comprehension or verbal comprehension. If I understand this, or oral comprehension, if I understand this, I can understand why he or she doesn't read and what is difficult. But there is a central thing. I need to work on literacy. If I don't have decoding, I will put all my effort on decoding. And I remember that we made a test to a student. He was exhausted, and after he read, I asked him, okay, please retell what you have just read. No, I cannot retell that. I read it. At least I was able to read it. Don't expect me to tell what I read about. So I need to work on decoding. There's no doubt that teaching has to be explicit. From the very beginning, I need to have expert decoders so that they will increase their knowledge for comprehension with controlled reading and more complex texts. It's a continuum. I start to learn reading, and then I will start to understand and to have a better comprehension or reading comprehension. I can have different disorders, a language disorder, dyslexia, or whatever, but I need to know that in Argentina, probably we need pedagogical strategies that are related to poor literacy, poor decoding, with the absence of strategies for reading comprehension and lack of vocabulary. I need all three things. This comic is well known and it's very nice. Here we have a meeting with the different species. This is what our education system shows us. Everybody is required to do the same when they are not prepared to do the same. All human beings can climb up the tree in different ways. If we think that this is diversity, we are done. We will never be able to change. I will never be able to see the nature of difficulty, which is silent. In fact, if I start to work from the beginning with all of them, with all my students, I will achieve a different system. But I need to understand that in this diversity, some people may find it more difficult to do things. But they can all, I don't need to care about diversity because everybody can learn how to read in the most remote or most disadvantaged societies, or with everybody is ready to start to read. But for that, I need a literacy system to that thinks of everybody and needs to make everybody work and might have a Finnish school. This is a school in Finland, different kinds of sizes of school, but the difference is not in the school. The difference is the one that makes the difference is the teacher. I can invest a lot of money in infrastructure. Nothing will change. We dropped down. We had very bad results in the PISA test. I need to give my teachers the best training possible, and this has to be evidence-based. I cannot forget that I have scientific evidence and I have systems that work and systems that do not work. Why should we insist on systems that are not working when making some modifications which imply hard work, train teachers in a profound and sustainable manner? I can use scientific-based programs that will help us to